The ranch was already dying before she ever stepped off the stagecoach. Caleb Hart had asked for a wife, but fate sent him a reckoning instead. The snow along Main Street had turned to brown slush, churned by boots, wagon wheels, and desperation. Caleb stood near the hitching post, hat pulled low, jaw clenched as the stagecoach creaked to a stop. He had waited 6 months for this moment, 6 months of letters exchanged through a matrimonial broker, 6 months of telling himself this was necessity, not hope. He was not a romantic man. Romance didn't keep cattle alive through drought. Romance didn't mend fences or pay debts. What he needed was a woman willing to cook, keep house, maybe bear children, someone steady enough to help him hold on while the land decided whether it would spare him or finish him. When the coach door opened, 2 men climbed down first, then she appeared. She wasn't what he expected. She wore a dark wool coat buttoned to her throat, gloves mended so carefully the stitches were almost artistic. Her hair was tucked beneath a plain bonnet, but loose strands framed a face that was neither soft nor severe, just observant. In one hand she carried a weathered suitcase. In the other, nothing. No fear. No hesitation. She looked at the town, then at Caleb, and her eyes narrowed slightly, not in judgment but assessment. "You're Caleb Hart," she said. He nodded. "You're Eleanor Whitcomb." "Yes." No smile, no nervous laughter. That unsettled him more than anything. They stood there awkwardly until he gestured toward the horse. "It's a long ride to the ranch." "So I've read," she replied. That was the first sign she was not like the others. The ranch lay 20 miles west, where the land thinned and the wind carried dust even in winter. The house sagged at one corner, the barn roof leaked, and half the cattle were gone, sold to pay debts or dead from sickness Caleb didn't understand. He said none of this on the ride. Eleanor said little too, but she watched everything. The condition of the fences, the way the horses moved, the color of the grass beneath the snow. When they arrived, she didn't gasp or falter. She set her suitcase down and looked at the buildings with quiet focus. "This place is struggling," she said. Caleb stiffened. "I know." "I didn't mean it as an insult," she replied calmly. "Just an observation." Inside the house, Eleanor unpacked efficiently, placing her few belongings neatly on the shelf he'd cleared. That night she cooked a meal better than anything he'd eaten in months, not fancy but nourishing. Still, when she asked about the ranch, Caleb brushed it off. "You don't need to worry about that," he said. "I'll handle the land." She studied him across the table. "If I'm to be your wife, the land concerns me." He frowned. "I didn't send for a ranch hand." "No," she said softly, "you sent for a partner." The word lingered uncomfortably. Over the next days, Eleanor surprised him repeatedly. She rose early not just to cook but to walk the property. She asked pointed questions about the cattle, the soil, the water source. She took notes, actual written notes in a small leather journal. One afternoon, Caleb found her in the barn examining a sick calf. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Trying to understand why it's dying," she said without looking up. "I already lost 2 this week. And you'll lose more if the cause isn't addressed." He scoffed. "You think reading books makes you an expert." She finally looked at him then, eyes steady. "I think ignoring knowledge is how men lose everything." That night they argued. Voices rose. Old frustrations poured out of Caleb, fear he hadn't named, shame he'd buried. Eleanor listened without interruption. When he finished, breathing hard, she spoke gently. "I grew up on a failing farm," she said. "I watched my father work himself into an early grave because he refused help, especially from women. I studied agriculture after he died, soil science, livestock disease. I didn't come here to shame you. I came because your letters sounded like a man who needed more than a housekeeper." Silence stretched between them. "Let me help," she said, "or send me back." Caleb turned away, staring at the cracked wall. Pride warred with desperation. In the end, desperation won. "Fine," he muttered, "do what you want." She didn't smile. She rolled up her sleeves. What followed changed everything. Eleanor identified rot in the hay supply that had been poisoning the cattle. She adjusted feeding schedules, introduced treatments Caleb had never heard of. She showed him how the water runoff was contaminating the lower pasture and helped him dig channels to redirect it. She calculated crop rotations that restored nutrients instead of draining them. Slowly, the ranch breathed again. Caleb watched in disbelief as calves survived, fences held, soil darkened. He worked beside her now, not above, not behind. And somewhere between shared labor and late-night planning by lamplight, respect turned into something warmer. One evening, after a long day repairing the barn roof, Eleanor handed him a cup of coffee and sat beside him on the porch. "You never asked why I answered the advertisement," she said. "I assumed desperation," he replied honestly. She smiled faintly, partly, but also hope. "I wanted a place where skill mattered more than appearance, where effort counted." He glanced at her. "And did you find it?" She met his gaze. "I did." Spring came early that year. Grass grew thick. Calves were born healthy. Neighbors took notice. Then trouble arrived on horseback. A man in a fine coat rode up one afternoon, papers in hand. "I represent the bank," he announced. "This property is in arrears." Caleb's heart sank. Eleanor stepped forward. "We're aware." The man smirked. "Then you know foreclosure is imminent." She handed him a ledger. "Review this." He scoffed but took it. Minutes passed. His expression changed. "These numbers are accurate," Eleanor said. "Production is up. Loss is down. We can make payments." The man hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "We'll revisit." When he left, Caleb turned to her, voice thick. "You saved this place." She shook her head. "We did." That night Caleb stood before her, hat in hand. "I asked for a wife because I was afraid to face failure alone," he said, "but I didn't expect this." She waited. "I don't want a marriage of convenience," he continued. "I want one of choice." Eleanor's eyes softened. "So do I." They married quietly the following Sunday. No town celebration, just vows spoken honestly, hands clasped firmly. Years later, when the ranch flourished and laughter filled the house, Caleb would sometimes watch Eleanor working the land and marvel. He had expected a wife for Christmas. What he received was the skill and strength that saved his ranch, and a partner who taught him that survival was never meant to be solitary. The first real test of what Eleanor had saved came the following winter. It arrived early and without mercy. By late October, the sky hardened into a dull, unbroken gray, and the wind carried a bite that spoke of storms yet to come. Caleb had lived on this land long enough to recognize the warning signs. Still, even he underestimated what was coming. The blizzard struck one night like an ambush, howling winds, blinding snow, temperatures plunging so fast the breath froze inside the lungs. The cattle panicked. Caleb woke to the sound of splintering wood and Eleanor shouting his name. By the time he pulled on his boots, snow was already seeping through the door cracks. "The south fence is down," she yelled over the wind. "If they scatter, we'll lose them." Caleb grabbed his coat. "You stay here." "No," Eleanor said sharply. "I know the herd patterns better than you do right now." There was no time to argue. They fought the storm together, leaning into the wind, shouting directions that barely carried. Eleanor moved with purpose, guiding the cattle toward higher ground she had marked months earlier, predicting floods Caleb hadn't believed would ever come. By dawn, the storm broke. They stood in the quiet aftermath, snow piled high, fences battered but the cattle alive. Caleb looked at Eleanor, her face raw from cold, eyes burning with exhaustion and determination. "I would have lost everything," he said hoarsely. She shook her head. "You listened, that's why you didn't." Word spread after that winter, not just that the Hart Ranch survived, but that it adapted. Farmers rode in from neighboring valleys asking questions they'd never asked women before. Eleanor answered them calmly, without triumph or resentment. Caleb stood beside her, letting them see what partnership truly looked like. But progress has enemies. One afternoon, Caleb returned from town with tension etched deep into his face. "There's talk," he said. "Men who don't like being shown up, especially by a woman." Eleanor sighed. "There always is." It escalated faster than either expected. Sabotage came in small, cruel ways, gates left open, supplies stolen, rumors spread about Eleanor manipulating Caleb, poisoning the land with foreign ideas. One night, a fire was set near the old shed. It burned out before reaching the house, but the message was clear. Caleb was furious. "I'll deal with this." Eleanor caught his arm, not alone and not with fists. She proposed something radical, inviting neighboring ranchers to an open demonstration, showing them the results, the records, the methods, turning fear into understanding. "It won't work on everyone," Caleb warned. "No," she agreed, "but it will work on enough." The gathering was tense, arms crossed, voices skeptical. Eleanor spoke anyway. She explained soil recovery, livestock rotation, weather adaptation. She showed numbers that couldn't be argued with. She answered insults with patience, doubts with facts. By the end of the day, some men left unconvinced. But many stayed behind to ask more questions. The sabotage stopped soon after. Years passed, the ranch expanded. Children followed, 2 boys and a girl, all stubborn, curious, and endlessly energetic. Eleanor taught them to read the land. Caleb taught them to respect it. Together, they raised a family that understood survival wasn't about dominance, it was about balance. One evening, long after the children were asleep, Caleb and Eleanor sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the hills. "I used to think asking for help meant weakness," Caleb said quietly. Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. "And now? Now I know it saved my life." She smiled, "And mine." The ranch that once stood on the edge of ruin became a place others looked to for guidance. Not because it was perfect, but because it had been broken and rebuilt with honesty. Caleb never forgot the day Eleanor arrived, suitcase in hand, eyes sharp with intelligence and resolve. He had expected a wife for Christmas, someone to fill space and silence. Instead, fate delivered a woman who taught him that love could be practical, strength could be shared, and survival, true survival, was something built together, one hard choice at a time.